Hi everybody, I'm State Senator Ryan Weld from the Northern Panhandle. I wanted to take a second and talk with everybody about what kind of transpired here in Charleston in the first week of the legislative session. I'm sure by now you are all aware of the State of the State given by Governor Justice on Wednesday, and some of the programs, some of the proposals that he set forth that evening. And so I wanted to take a second to review those and talk about what I think it would mean for the state. The governor, in his address, put together what is the biggest tax increase in the history of the state of West Virginia. And we're talking about an increase in the sales tax, an increase of the gasoline tax, an increase in beer and alcohol sales, a new tax to be imposed on employers in the form of a B&O tax. Just a lot of what we didn't think was going to happen. We had, received signals that perhaps the governor was going to try to do some new initiatives, some bold moves to reform the government of West Virginia, to rein in the bureaucracy that many of us feel is oversized. And unfortunately, that's not what we heard. What we heard were the same kind of things that we've been hearing from people in Charleston for a very long time. I'm disappointed, to say the least, that we didn't take this opportunity, that the governor didn't take this opportunity to really try to reform the government here in Charleston, to change how we're doing business. And so right now, we feel that it's up to us to make that happen. We feel here in the Senate and over in the House that we're going to have to show the leadership, and we're prepared to do that, and I'm prepared to do that, as I said many times over and over again during the campaign. That's why I'm here, to try to lead, to try to change West Virginia, because what we've been doing for so long isn't working. And a good example of my disappointment is that the budget that the governor proposed on Wednesday is hundreds of millions of dollars more than the budget that was proposed last year by Governor Tomlin. So in the face of knowing that West Virginia was looking at its greatest budget deficit and our greatest budget crisis, probably in the history of the state, he's proposed more spending than last year. And to me, that's just reckless. We've got to look at that and say, how are we looking at a state where our population has declined, unfortunately, significantly over the past 2 decades, yet our state budget and what we are spending continues to go up dramatically? And I don't think it's fair to pass the buck along to the people of West Virginia, to the employers of West Virginia, to make them pay for what is an oversized bureaucracy here in Charleston. And so we're going to be looking at that over the next couple of weeks during the session. We've got 60 days, or a little less now that we've just ended day 3, to really reform government. Take a look at the tax base and broaden that. How can we just not be so heavily reliant on the extraction industries and move forward? Besides the budget, something else that I was very disappointed in is that the governor really didn't mention too much about substance abuse. And what he did mention I found to be very disheartening, because he proposed 3 treatment facilities around the state. And that was one in Charleston, there was one in the Eastern Panhandle, and one around Beckley, and not one in the Northern Panhandle. We have a big problem in the Northern Panhandle, and we all know it. And for the governor to completely ignore the problem that we have, to completely ignore the top 4 counties of this state and the issues that, one of the biggest issues that we're facing, I think is very unfair. And I think it's very unfortunate that we're now going to have to try to fight against that bias that the Northern Panhandle just doesn't matter as much as the rest of the state. So those are the kind of things that I looked at and became disheartened about. There were some good things in the address, though, and I don't want to make it sound all doom and gloom. The governor talked about education and getting rid of this A to F standard that we set for our schools, that unfairly ranks schools and puts them in a position where they don't think they're good enough, or they don't think they're as good as their peers, when in actuality they are. And he talked about getting rid of what's called the Smarter Balance standards, and that's Common Core, because right now that plays into the assessment of how a teacher is doing in a class, how those students do on those tests. And the tests aren't graded. The students know that. They don't play a part in their grades or how they're going to graduate. So unfortunately, sometimes those tests, which may not be prepared for as a normal test would be, are going to go into what a teacher has to be graded upon for their assessment and how they're doing in their job. And I've always thought that was unfair, so I'm happy to hear that he's getting rid of that. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to try to keep you guys updated as much as possible. We're very busy here in Charleston, and I'm going to try to do this once, maybe twice a week, just to give everybody a heads up of what's going on down here, what we're working on, what I'm working on personally. You all know that if you have any questions, please just let me know. Call me, email me, find me on Facebook, If you see something, if you see a bill, just please, just let me know. I appreciate it.